Loki and Submarine. I can dive. Like and subscribe.
No, you're scared. And honestly, I know you're angry too. Because something feels wrong. People are working hard and still feel replaceable. Parents are worried their children are training for the world that may not need them. Young people are asking whether efforts still leads anywhere. And this fear is not irrational. The IMF says AI could affect almost 40% of jobs worldwide, replacing some work and complementing other. So before we begin, let's do one thing with honesty. Let's stop pretending this is only a technology story. The story is about survival, about belonging, about the old promise between a person and a society. And today, we're gonna go back to the moment that promise may have begun. Before there was a paycheck, before there was a company, before there was even a word called job, there was a fear. The fear of not enough food, not enough shelter, not enough order, not enough tomorrow. Then a handshake happened. The first handshake. And with that handshake, human and society made a promise. I will contribute. You will let me belong. And from that promise, 3 children were born. Job, technology, economy. What you just saw was not the birth of a paycheck. It was the birth of a promise. Long before modern word job appeared in English, maybe around 1558, humans were already making arrangement with each other to survive together. The word came late, the need came first. Because society has always needed the same few things: food, shelter, coordination, fairness, and continuity. Histories of work shows that labor has always been tied to the activities necessary for collective survival. That first handshake meant, I will contribute and you will let me belong. That is why job, technology, and economics are born together in this story, not as enemies but as a solution. At the beginning, all three were trying to answer the same question: how do we survive together? At first, they were allies. Job lifts stone, teaches other, shares bread. Technology sharpens the plow, strengthens the wheel, preserves the harvest. Economics count fairly, allocate grains, reward effort, prevent wastage. Society needed more than labor. It needed production, distribution, coordination, incentives, stability. And for a time, handshake worked. There was a time when the balance felt more visible. Job gave human effort a place. Technology made that effort stronger. Economics helped distribute resources and coordinate survival. That is why work was never only about income. The World Bank has written that the jobs are fundamental source of self-respect, social identity, and social cohesion. So, when people say it's just a job, that was never fully true. A job was also routine, status, a role in the tribe, a reason to wake up and feel needed. That is the stability the old handshake gave us. Not perfection, but orientation. You knew where you stood. You knew what was expected. You knew how to earn your place. And then history began to move faster. Sometimes job was a craft, sometimes a task, sometimes a shift, sometimes a career, sometimes a badge, a desk, a title, or a dream. The shape changed with every great machine, but the hidden deal stayed the same. Do the work, earn your place. Job had to be done, society had to be organized. The activities and labor necessary to its survival. As work historian put it, here's the part we often forget. Job did not stay the same. It changed shape every time society changed its tool. In domestic system, people worked from home on material supplied by merchants and were paid by piece or wage. Then the factory system replaced the domestic system. pulling work into a centralized building powered by water and steam. Later, Taylorism broke job into timed motion and measurable units. What changes next is not just a costume, it's the meaning underneath it. Job said, "You changed my tools." Technology said, "Yes, but you still need me, and I still need you." Each time, economics whispered the same spell: more output, less friction, lower cost, faster scale. Economics said, "I did not lie, I only optimized." And job asked the most relevant question: optimized for whom? Now we arrive at the part that feels different. Team replaced muscle, computer replaced many routine rules, the web collapsed the distance, and mobile made work always reachable. But AI is stranger. The OECD defines an AI system as a machine-based system that can infer from input how to generate output, like prediction, content, recommendation, or decisions. That sounds technical, but the emotional truth is very simple. This is the first time technology is not only helping the hand, it is entering the mind. That is why people feel confused, because the thing being touched is not only labor, it is judgment, language, planning, the work many people thought was uniquely human. And when that happens, job begins to ask a very painful question. Was I valued for being a human or only for being necessary? Job said, I carried identity, dignity, rent, family, hope. I was never just a task, and that was the betrayal. Job thought it was being paid for effort, but often it was being paid for necessity. Job turned to technology in fury and says, "You deceived me." Technology says, "I didn't rewrite the promise." That's when they both turned towards economics. When fear hits, we look for obvious villain. Maybe it's machine, maybe it's AI, maybe it's the engineer, maybe it's the company. But slow down. Technology does not choose the scorecard, economics does. Across history, economics kept asking, how do we get more output, more scale, more speed, with less cost? And in many eras, that logic helped society survive and grow. But it also kept rewriting what counted as valuable. The danger begins when job is reduced to a line item. When a person becomes a labor cost instead of a citizen, a parent, a neighbor, a mind, a life. That is when optimization quietly turned into greed. Not cartoon greed, systemic greed. The kind that sounds rational while breaking the promise underneath. And that is where our story turns. When survival demanded scale, economics chose factories. When competition demanded efficiency, it chose standardization. When growth demanded speed, it chose software. Now, when cognition itself can be industrialized, it chose AI. Job says, so I was never the goal? Economics says, you were the bridge. Job says, what happens when you burn the bridge before building another one? And here is the real panic. If job disappears too fast, society does not lose money alone. It loses structure. The WHO says unemployment, job insecurity, financial insecurity, and recent job loss are risk factors for suicide attempts. The ILO also warns that young people continue to face major employment challenges globally. So this is not just economic problem. It can become a mental health problem, family formation problem, a social cohesion problem. When large number of people stop feeling needed, the damage spread. Less trust, less patience, less hope, more despair. That is the part societies usually notice too late. Not when the software demo happens, when the neighborhood changes, when school changes, when home changes. That is why job matters more than we admit. Probably the question was wrong from the start. But panic is not wisdom, and fear is not a plan. If the old job-centered world is weakening, then our task is not to worship the past or worship the machine. Our task is to redesign the promise. OECD is already studying how AI may force changes not only in labor market but in social protection itself. That tells you something important. Even institutions now understand that employment alone may not be enough to organize dignity and security in future. So maybe the next time handshake cannot be built on wages. Maybe it must include learning, care, ownership, contribution and protection. Maybe the future word is not job. Maybe it's something wider, something more human, something that remembers why the first handshake happened at all. And that is where a little hope returns. This is where we must stay alert because every age think it has solved the problem and every age creates a new blind spot. The industrial revolution solved some form of scarcity and created brutal factory condition. The factory system brought huge productive gains, but it also transformed how people relate to one another and to planet. AI may also solve real problems. Higher productivity, better services, new capabilities. AI can improve productivity and job quality in some settings, even while creating serious risk around automation, agency, bias, and privacy. So the final question is, who is making the next handshake and on whose behalf? Because if we do not ask that now, we may wake up living inside an agreement we never consciously made. The future will not be decided by AI alone. It will be decided by the promise we choose to make with it. Because somewhere, even now, another secret handshake has already begun.